All right, everyone. Welcome to another week of the Big 12 podcast. I'm Coach Danger Zone of the TCU Horned Frogs.
And I'm Coach Minnowsotan of the Iowa State Cyclones.
And another big, exciting week in the Big 12 just went down. We had Kansas State and Texas put up one of the more like kind of fireworks that we've seen in a while. We saw West Virginia have a statement win against Oklahoma. And then we saw Texas Tech go down against Baylor, so their second straight loss. This week, though, we'll be looking forward and kind of talking about the team so far, what their biggest surprise and biggest disappointment is, and then look a bit towards the future and say out of their recruits who have committed so far, which one's the most important for them. So starting right now, we always go reverse order of the power rankings, and that means your Iowa State Cyclones come on first.
Yep. Oh, where do I begin with the Iowa State Cyclones? Everything about them is just kind of disappointing on this year. I was going into the year so optimistic about everything because I was almost a kind of like contender for the conference championship last year, coming off the 2018 season. And it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I only had two players leave, Wilcox, Pacheco, and Oldham. And then that pretty much took out my entire offense.
Yeah, that was a big group of players leaving.
Yeah. And so I'd say probably the biggest surprise of this year is not Elliott Effie for me, one of my wide receivers who's a 4.0, but Sincere Spikes, how he's able to come in and then beat out every one of my wide receivers at I think he's only like a 3.0. But how he's able to just play every week and then able to get a bunch of yards, considering that I don't have a quarterback that is good. And I'd say, and also another disappointment is David Tolliver, coming off a year to where he won. It wasn't defensive freshman, but he made an All-American. He was All-Conference, not All-American.
Yeah,
All-Conference last year. And so I kind of expected him to get more interceptions. I'm not seeing any sacks on my defensive side, so it's just kind of like everything's falling apart.
yeah. David Tolliver so far, if I'm looking at the sheet right, has 3 interceptions. So, I mean, you can always hope for more, but right now I believe he's leading the conference or tied for that lead.
Huh.
But
So he's probably like the if I had to say biggest, well, I already listed the two
yeah,
things. No,
well,
I didn't list biggest disappointment.
I think
I just said my entire offense.
yeah, that's if you can put an entire offense there. I think that all kind of falls on whatever quarterback you're playing. So August Blank or Peter Edge or whichever one. I think they've all been struggling, and I think that's what's been kind of killing this Iowa State team. I think their biggest disappointment would definitely fall there on the offensive side. I think the biggest surprise is going to come back in that defensive backfield, though. Israel McKenzie, their number 2 corner, is another player who has 3 interceptions on the year. It's tied for the conference lead with David Tolliver. And Lamont Carson from West Virginia has 3. Bradley Spurlock from Kansas has 3. No one has 4 at this point. So, and then there's a lot of people with 3. Patrick Lombardo at Oklahoma State also has 3. So the fact that number 2 corner can be your second guy that making plays in the secondary has been impressive, but your offense hasn't been able to capitalize on that, and it's losing games for the Cyclones.
Mainly in the fact that I can't get anything going. I noticed in the first 2 weeks, defense held up pretty well, and I changed some things this last week, so I'm not sure if that's partially the reason why I almost got shut out again. Is because I changed my offense to better reflect my defensive and hopefully damage control things, but so far that hasn't been looking out.
And it's a long way to come back from 0-5, but it's still the Big 12, the nation's most exciting conference. So we'll see. but it definitely needs some adjustments on the offensive side of the ball. Need to find a consistent starter at quarterback because right now you have I think 9 players at that position.
Yeah, it's
Or
a hefty bunch at that position.
8 players at quarterback, and then I think one redshirting. Or no, there's not. But that's still a lot. Hopefully, you'll have a new one coming in next year in recruiting. But he's still is still wavering between Nebraska and Iowa State. But speaking of recruits, who would you say is the most important for this Iowa State Hawk or Cyclones team? Not Hawkeye.
Yeah, same thing, but I'd probably say the most important recruit that I'm probably going after is Von Shepard. I feel like he,
Yeah.
along with Kofi this next year, who's my redshirt running back, who's a 5.0 speed. It's probably the uptick in the offense I'm going to be needing this next year.
But if guys already committed, what would you say? You have Big Rose, the 204.5 punter.
Probably the man. I've never had a good punter come to ISU, so that'd be good. But the key recruit that I've gotten so far is probably Martin McRae, the center that I got this last week. I kind of don't have any depth. I know I have a center leaving this next year. No, he's only a junior. But Leo Medley, the senior who's the backup, is a redshirt senior. So it's just kind of more of depth for that. And so kind of if I were to replace someone, it could be him.
Yeah, and that is nice because hopefully your center Russell Daigle doesn't declare. But if he does,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not sure McRae's someone you want coming in. You have a guy redshirting this year that can take that spot. But he's a guy that 2 years from now, as a redshirt freshman, is going to be able to come in. Still think it might be Ben Groves, though. I think he's a player who can flip the field. Your current punting situation isn't great.
No,
And,
like I said, I've never had a good punter come through ISU.
and I think people don't really see how a punter can change the game, but it can make a big difference. And I think we'll see how that changes things and makes your offense a little better, or at least puts your defense in worse situation or less bad situations, and can protect both sides of the ball.
Mm-hmm. All right, so moving on then, or
Yeah, let's move on to the Oklahoma Sooners. And for biggest disappointment, can you say their entire season?
I would say their entire season. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that I was beneath them in the power rankings because they got destroyed by West Virginia this last week.
That is kind of getting excessive, but I think people at some level just still trust Oklahoma for being Oklahoma.
Yeah,
But
I feel like after they lost their quarterback this last year, it's kind of just a whole identity crisis for them.
Mm-hmm. And the identity they have is Maurice Wright. That is their identity. That is who they are, and that's what their team is revolved around, and just isn't enough. Especially, I really want to say their biggest disappointment so far this season is Eric Pope. I think he's not been good for them. I think he has 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, only 7 yards per attempt, but that pales in comparison to their defense. I don't really know where to pin I don't know any specific player to put the blame on for that defense, but they're giving up or not hundreds of points, but to Auburn they got torn up, to West Virginia, and Maurice White can't do it all, and Eric Pope's just a freshman.
Yeah. How many sacks do they have on the year?
I can look that up.
Because I feel like they don't have anything for sacks.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, keep talking because it'll take a second to look up.
But yeah, I was looking at their stat line, and then it's just I'm not seeing any sacks on the year at all. So that's kind of like I feel they can't put pressure on a quarterback. And in West Virginia's case, that kind of made Mohamed Foster look really good because since they can't pressure the quarterback or get to their the offensive
Yep. They still
front.
don't have a sack yet on the season.
Yeah, that's where they're going wrong. I have a feeling is that the fact that they can't pressure anything on the defensive front, and quarterbacks are able to throw for almost 400 yards on their defense. So
Marcus Black and Muhammad Foster tore that defense apart. So I think in the end, you put the blame on their defensive ends or just whoever their primary pass rushers are. So their defensive end, their outside linebackers are not getting the job done.
mm-hmm.
As far as biggest surprise, let's let's not say surprise here because I think we all knew he was good, but it's still how dominant Maurice White is. Because he has been really incredible this year. He's been the best running back in the conference, I think, hands down. So far this year, he has, let's see, 125 carries for 609 yards and 6 touchdowns. The next most yards in the conference, or Solomon McLaughlin in one more game, has 760 yards. But as far as per game goes, he has 101 or 128 yards a game, and no one in the conference has more than 103. So he is a guy who's carrying the load with a high yards per carry too. He has 4.87 yards per carry, which again leads the conference. So he has the most carries. He gets the most out of them. Or yeah, it leads the conference. So I think people expected him to be good, and he has been, but I think it's still surprising how well he's been able to play without the help around him.
Yeah, but the thing that he's missing is he's able to rush for touchdowns. He's kind of average in that category, falling in the middle of the pack in the Big 12. That being said, he rushes for a bunch of yards, but that's probably like their greatest player at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd agree with you there.
Yeah, when evaluating a running back, I don't know about you, but I usually look at their ability to score touchdowns as more reflective as the entire offense rather than just the running back.
Just kind of like the whole transition into like getting a first down and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think yards and yards per carry are more important in evaluating. So because touchdowns, you can have a guy score a bunch of 2-yard touchdowns. Like Shamar Burrow's freshman year, he had 11 in 6 games because his first 4 games he had 2 each. But it's not really an indictment on how good he was because he wasn't getting yards. But on the other hand, you have players who rack up the yards and then throw a quick slant in the end zone every time they get down there for the red zone offense or something along those lines.
You know, looking at his stats, I thought he was a speed running back, but looking back at it now, I found out that he's a power running back, which is kind of weird for him to have these numbers as a power running back. But, I mean, meaning that it's good for him to be getting a lot of yardages as a power back.
Mm-hmm. No, he's definitely the Big 12 has a lot of really good power backs at the moment because Simeon Wells is a power back as well, has a Solomon McLaughlin, and even Elijah Humphreys. I know Shamar Burrows isn't great, but he's a power guy. I think Muhammad Fosta is Mustafa. So there's a lot of them in the conference. To recruit, there are a lot of options for the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, like a lot. I can see they are working on their defense, I want to say, here, getting more outside linebackers. I was looking at their depth chart, and they only have one left outside linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
So they could be kind of tiring out their middle of the infield, having to play every play. And they have also started fixing that defensive ends with the 3.5, but they haven't nearly landed. Oh, and they have a 4.5.
Yeah,
but
they're 4.5-star guy.
Really buffing up that defensive end. So I imagine they know about their weaknesses in their defensive front, and they're doing everything to try to put pressure on the quarterback as they haven't been able to do this year.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as their most important commit so far, I think it's going to be Max Abel, that 4.5-star defensive end who his specialty, like he tends to be a run stopper. He keeps the quarterback inside the pocket and can do a lot from the edge, but he's not necessarily a pass rusher.
Hmm.
I think that's still kind of what they need. He's still a
Yeah.
guy who
They.
can get to the quarterback, but
Hmm.
they can't let a guy like Muhammad Foster run around on them. And I think Max Abel is going to come in and be better, like next year, be better than anyone on their roster at doing that.
I'm
Even
kind of interested how they will in the future. How they will. It looks like they're trying to change their defensive ends from a blitz mentality, which is they only have one contain this year. But I'm kind of interested to see how they'll transition from just the all blitz to contain
Mhm.
in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for them. And I think having defensive ends who can contain the quarterback in the pocket are very good for scrambling types. It's kind of a struggle for if they're playing a drop back pocket passer. And typically, though, the Big 12 has kind of moved towards the scrambling types. Even Kyler Tackett at Texas is going to be there for a little while. You have Sam Milner at TCU. Christian Graham at Kansas is a pocket type. So it's going to be interesting to see where the conference goes and which works out best for them.
Yeah.
All right. Now, still moving up past the Sooners, we have the Kansas State Wildcats. Now, for Kansas State, I'm going to make their surprise and their biggest disappointment. They're both the greatest because Raheem Burrell has had that kind of an up and down season. He's had some games where you were really impressed with how he does, and some games where he just blows it for the team. He's throwing interceptions and not looking good out there. This week against Kansas, he did what he needed to do. He put them in a position to win, but they just ended up against Texas. They ended up doing what they needed to do, but they didn't end up winning the game. But it was an impressive performance, especially in offensive output for the Kansas State Wildcats. But he's also had his down moments. I think that's what you kind of get with a star quarterback who's coming from a JUCO and doesn't quite have a rein on things yet.
Mm-hmm. I was looking at his stats here, and then he's kind of like how I want to say how August Blank is supposed to be. Like, he's about a 60% passer, gets about as many touchdowns as interceptions, but overall, um, he's good with whenever he completes the ball, having like one of the higher yards per completion in the Big 12.
And that could be a byproduct of not having the best receivers.
Mm-hmm.
That he could get them the ball, but they don't always catch it or they're not always open. Kansas State has taken a decent number of sacks this year, which is also a problem for them. And I don't think that's all on Morrell.
Yeah.
But he's second in the conference in passing touchdowns, just ahead of Kyler Tackett and tied with Marcus Schwartz, Muhammad Foster, and 6 behind Chester Brenner, who has a scorching 17. And we'll definitely talk about him in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But he also is second in the conference interceptions behind August Blank. He has 10. So he's rocking the Joel King line of almost as many interceptions as touchdowns.
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to work out for him. I think it's going to end up being a good surprise for him. But right now, it's kind of been a disappointment. I think that's why I chose him for this, because he falls onto both sides, and he hasn't taken advantage of guys like Devin Tillman yet, or Ricky Seau had a great game against Texas. But there's still a lot to be seen. There's still a lot of season left to play. There are only 5 games in for Kansas State, so see if Raheem can take him to a bowl.
Yeah. And I'm really hoping he'll be able to get there. I know it's kind of hard for a quarterback who is a redshirt junior to just kind of come out of it and then just expect it to be kind of good because he's had that JUCO experience. But
we told everyone it would be good.
Yeah, I have a feeling he'll fit into his role just fine. But at this moment in time, it seems kind of like uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
Like their whole entire offense is set around pass blocking offense. So I imagine it'll work out for the pocket passing QB from Mulberry area.
Yeah. As far as defensive side of the ball, Kansas State has had their struggles there. I can't really say much or surprise or disappointment because kind of going into the season, that's what was kind of expected of them. That's what people were thinking their struggles would be, and they impressed for the first few games, but falling into those same struggles, especially in the last couple weeks. But let's see if they can back up on this 2-game skid.
Yeah.
All right.
How are they doing on defense this year?
They got torn up by Texas because they scored 40 points and still couldn't beat them. Against TCU, they didn't have a good game. Milner had the best game of his career, and then very young career though. And then before that, they had 3 pretty good games against 3 not good teams.
I mean, they held Texas Tech. I mean, not Texas Tech. Texas to 3-10 on third down. So they're obviously holding people. Just I feel like they're not stopping when it comes to being able to stop passing or rushing per se.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, yeah, but yeah, I think rushing defense is their biggest concern. But I'm gonna like fly in the face of saying that when I say that their most important recruit right now is Sammy Schuler, the corner they got from right out of Texas. Actually, 2 of their 3 recruits are from Texas. He was their star guy and plucked him right out of Poteet. And it's a great town in Poteet, Texas. And pulled him out of there. He's a guy who's going to come in and start immediately and fit in really well with this Kansas receiving core. Kansas State receiving or defensive core. Wow, I'm out of it. Yeah, but he's going to come in and be their top cornerback year one. They're all man coverage guys, and that's what he specializes in. So they're going to have a pretty salty cornerback core in a year from now.
Yeah.
Go the other way and say that their tight end PK Lovelace might be their top guy because he's another target for Raheem, though.
I'm trying to get down to their recruits here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay. PK Lovelace is a guy from Atwood, Kansas.
Oh, yeah, I see him now. Yeah, that's probably like one of their better things that they have signed this year. Yeah, it can really help them on offense.
Right now, they don't really have a good receiver. They have Damani Askew as their top guy, but he's a sophomore and he's not great. And we'll see if PK Lovelace comes in and plays immediately or they redshirt him for a year. If they redshirt him for a year, he's probably going to play with Julius Minnow, which is unfortunate for him, but he'll still get to play. So I think he can be another tight end to kind of bring that quarterback up.
I feel like Julius Minnow will kind of see us. Kind of weird seeing Julius Minnow benched, but yeah, I can understand why he benched him. Mm-hmm. Bring him back for a year.
Yeah, he's redshirting now.
But yeah, I think that would probably be in the best interest for Kansas State to do that. And this tight end recruit is probably the best in the class that they've had.
Yeah. All right. So next up, we got the Kansas Jayhawks, who have fallen to 2-3. They have a losing record now, but it's still Kansas. They're still 1-1 in the conference after taking down Iowa State. They've also lost to Notre Dame, TCU, and another school. Can't think off the top of my head, but they are kind of struggling through Christian Graham's first year. How do you see them going forward? What do you think their biggest surprise and disappointment are so far?
I'd say their biggest surprise I'm trying to get to their depth chart here.
Yeah. So yeah, they're surprised, or as far as team performance go, I think the biggest surprise is how good their defense has been. They've had some games where they have struggled, but let's see, last week they had a great defensive performance against TCU, and they have the. I can look up their stats here as well. Now, I think as far as disappointments go, it's weird putting freshman quarterbacks in the disappointments because you don't want to put that much onto them because it's hard to expect a lot of them. But so far, Christian Graham has had his struggles: 9 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, 62% completion is decent, but still one of the lower ones in the conference. And then he's high. He's again decent in the conference in yards per attempt, but I wouldn't say he's their disappointment. I'd probably go with their running back Rod Fulton as far as an offensive piece that's not performing well.
Mm-hmm.
102 carries for 468, 5 touchdowns, 4.59 yards per carry, which isn't going to be enough to do, and he has struggled in their biggest game so far.
Trying to get up to their most recent games here.
All right. So Rod Fulton is, I mean, it's hard to single out any part of this Kansas team that's really been struggling. I think when they're losing efforts, it's just a lot of times that they get outmatched, or for one reason or another, their team just gets beat. There's no one you can point out and say has been the biggest problem. But I think there's one side you can say is not the problem, and that's their receiving core, because they're giving Christian Graham a lot of options to be able to do this. And I think he kind of disappointed last week against TCU, but this has been a great option. And I think their biggest surprise, though, has been just how dominant Noah Hills has been. 18 catches for 323 and 3 touchdowns. It's 100, or he doesn't have his yards per game here, but it's 17 yards per catch. That is a shocking number. So he's getting downfield and he's making plays for them. And I think the fact that he's such a downfield threat for Christian Graham has been a surprise. Usually you expect your tight end to kind of be a safety valve, but he's getting to open space. And I think he's another guy making good plays for the Jayhawks. And I think that's probably their biggest surprise defensively. They've had a lot of pieces. You have Bradley Spurlock, who's kind of had an up and down career with the Jayhawks. He's going to already have 3 interceptions, so which is a great number. It still, like I said, leads the conference as we were talking about earlier. Then you have a couple guys on defense who have a sack or two, but no one in particular is that outstanding on the defense. So it's kind of a group effort. You don't have, like I said, Spurlock's probably the star of it all, but you don't really have anyone making a ton of big plays. You have, let's see right here, one guy with a sack and a half. Jamari Callahan has 2 sacks. Albert Duke has a sack and a half. And then the quarterback. But at this point in the season, that's not cause for alarm. You also have Amir Ransom with a sack. I don't know. You have thoughts?
No, you basically summed up everything in my head. Just how their corners are kind of being disappointing, but their running back situation is good at the moment. I think that's what you said, right?
Somewhat. I think Rod Fulton has.
Oh, you said he was the disappointment.
Well, as far as the offense goes, I think disappointing for them. Yeah.
I was just trying to find their games here, but then I realized they had a off bye week this week. Did they?
Yeah. Kansas was on bye week this week.
Yeah.
And
Who do they face next week?
Next week, I'm actually not sure. I don't have that up right here, but here I haven't pulled it up, so I don't think It'll take a while too. All right. So, well, I guess on that note, Storm, we'll turn to your recruiting class because I think off or choices here are pretty obvious. Their recruits so far, they have Richard Foote, who's a offensive guard out of South Carolina, 3.5 star. They have Adrian Henderson, an inside linebacker out of Texas, and then Armani Bello, the offensive tackle out of Texas, who is might be the best offensive tackle in the country. The dude is a bona fide stud, and they pulled him out right into the nose of Texas Tech, and he is going to be a huge piece for these Kansas Jayhawks, especially a Kansas Jayhawks team that loses 4 of their 5 offensive linemen, their starters. And he's going to come in, be an instant starter, be a guy for 4 years here. He's going to start at left tackle. Like, he's primarily a run blocking type, but they don't really have another left tackle to play. So unless they bring in a junior college guy, it's going to be Bello locking down that side of the offensive line for 4 years.
I'd agree with that, especially replacing the 5.0 that they're going to be losing. They don't have anyone redshirted, do they?
No.
No, they don't.
They don't really have any depth either because not only is Been Good gone, Connie Fapo's gone, and they also lose Joshua Falencio, so they're 2 deep at offensive tackles are all gone.
Yeah.
Benjamin Peterman's going to be there though. He's going to be they're probably the starting right tackle. And their offensive line depth is just getting hammered here.
Yeah, and then that's kind of like the way it works sometimes, but I'd probably say, considering that he's out of state and they had to fight off a bunch of Texas schools for him, yeah, that's probably their greatest recruit. Although it's kind of weird how they haven't gotten anyone from Kansas yet.
Yeah. I think they focused a lot on Bello. I think they focused on top guys because, like, Evander Lawton, who's a inside linebacker in Texas, they're fighting Texas Tech for. It's going to be interesting to see how they win on how they play each of those recruits. And I'd say let Kansas State kind of dominate the state, but not of that either. And I just think a partial result of it is that there's not that much great high school talent in the state of Kansas.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, but if you're in Kansas's shoes, you need depth and you need it fast. So I'd try getting most of the recruits out of Kansas if they're not already taken. I don't know how many are in Kansas, but it just seems like he's graduating a lot and he hasn't been able to replace them.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe there's a lot of battles between Kansas and Kansas State that we don't see right now.
Mm-hmm.
That'll work themselves out through over the season.
He's also graduating a bunch of guards and his defensive ends.
Yeah, Kansas loses a lot. So this is really his last big year, so we're going to see how out. Just talking about their general season, I think Kansas still has a shot this year. They've only lost 1 conference game, and if they went out there in the conference championship game, because that's how it works here. But because you can always get in with just 1 conference loss unless there's a 3-way tie. So they still have a shot because of the new setup, and things look kind of bad with back-to-back losses, or not back-to-back losses because they beat Iowa State a couple weeks ago, but. Now, moving on to the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I think their biggest surprise is the one and only Solomon McLaughlin.
Yeah. Did they also have a bye week this last week?
No, they did not. But I'm not sure. They played Baylor, I believe, Thursday night.
Okay, I'm on the Saturday night.
Yeah, they played Baylor Thursday night, and they lost that game. But biggest surprise has been how impressively Solomon McLaughlin could come in as a true freshman and just carry the load.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has 166 carries for 760 yards and 11 touchdowns. Wow. The 11 touchdowns leads the conference by 3 yards, leads the conference by about 160 or about 151. 4.5 yards per carry isn't great. Even we're kind of trashing Rod Fulton. They're talking about how he's struggling a little bit, and even he has 4.59, but he did that with 166 carries. He's getting 126 yards a game. Just
He's on track to be a player of the year for the Big 12 and possibly an All-American.
Yeah, we'll see about that. But
he hasn't fumbled. He hasn't had anything that is negative about him yet.
Yeah. His last 2 games, I will say he's had sub 4.1 yards per carry.
Yeah.
So when he's been playing better teams and like Oklahoma State and Baylor, and they didn't win, he's somewhat struggled. He's still rushed over 100 yards in every single game so far, which only Maurice White in the conference can say that he's done. So that is one really good thing about him. That's a big benefit to his season. And I think we can slow down on the player of the year. I think that's going to come soon for him. But in a conference with Muhammad Foster and Chester Brenner right now, conversation, which does say a lot about him. I think another big surprise for Texas Tech is Shapiro the Hero. I think people expected McLaughlin to be good, but Shapiro was not good the past couple years.
Oh, no. The fact that he only had 10 attempts, but I'm not sure if that's due to their offensive scheme or something else that I cannot see. But the fact is that he has about a 60% pass completion, and I think that's what it was.
Yeah, Shapiro has completing 62% of his passes. He's only attempted 79 passes on the season.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'm not sure if that's their offense, but they don't really have the it doesn't look like they're setting up for a smash mouth offense.
Yeah, I think, but that kind of is all they have. They put everything behind McLaughlin. But yes, 79 passes games. That feels like what Brad Davis did in one game against Western Kentucky a few years ago. But he also has 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. He's the only player in the conference to not throw a pick.
Yeah, which is kind of weird to think that even Peter Edge has thrown 3 interceptions and he only had 20 attempts. So
yeah, I'm kind of thinking though. Let's see, their receivers that passing game might be the biggest disappointment just as a whole. And part of it's scheme, part of it's because they're kind of moving away and pounding the ball, but it's also costing them because being that one-dimensional and relying that much on a freshman is kind of killer. I think that's what they're kind of running into here in the most recent games. Looked damn good against North Carolina, though. And it's been less and less impressive each week. But I don't think none of these things are bad for Texas Tech because I think they've exceeded expectations to this point in the season.
Yeah, I just feel like a hybrid quarterback, especially a 3.5, a 4.5, should be able to have a bigger role in an offense, especially when they have a 3.5, a 4.0 speed guy, or they have 3.5 receivers down a lot down the thing. But they're starting a running back at wide receiver, so it could be receivers that they are having trouble with, or the fact is they are starting a lot of running backs at wide receiver. Holy cow.
Yeah, I think that's part of it because they don't have the guys in the passing game, and I think that's hamstringing them. I'll say hamstringing them and really hurting their offensive production or what it could be, especially if Shapiro can play at this efficiency with more attempts.
Yeah.
So as far as biggest recruit, I said with Kansas we only had one option. With Texas Tech, we really only have one option because they only have one commitment so far. Damn good one. Charlie Becker, the 5-star center from Flatonia, Texas. He's a run blocker, and he is probably the second best recruit in the state of Texas behind Garrett Powers at Baylor. We'll talk about him later. And probably the best center in the country, maybe slightly behind that guy from California, but he is exactly who Texas Tech wants if they're going to run this. They're going to try and do this.
Yeah, he's a run blocker, right?
Yes, he's a run blocker. He's already better than their current center, I believe. He could come in.
Yeah, their current center is graduating. He's a 3.5.
Yeah, but he could come in and start while he was in high school.
Oh, yeah.
Better, yeah.
He's going to be an instant 1-year starter and then kind of give any team who is a pass defense a run for their money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because give him one shot, take the snap, hand McLaughlin the ball, run straight, and you're guaranteed 4 yards of play.
Yeah. This defense, I mean, this offense is going to be stacked for the run game these next couple years, and I'm kind of excited to see where they will get them.
Yeah, it really is. We talk about Texas Tech's recruiting, but they pulled probably two of the best recruits in the States over the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be a huge benefit. I think Becker's going to bring a lot to this offense and make Tech hard to play against.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how they go about things, and I think they're going to stick with the run game, especially at the true freshman spot. He's going to have a big role here in the future.
Great. All right. So past the Raiders, we're about at the halfway point now, and now look to the Baylor Bears.
On to the winners, or the consecutive winners, I should say.
The winners of the Butt Bowl.
Yep.
But yeah, Baylor has a lot to be excited about. They won 2 straight. Like, they started off really concerningly struggling in their pass defense in their out of conference games against Cal. They lost. UCLA, they barely managed to beat, and they lost to Arkansas in triple overtime. And that's their biggest disappointment, is just how atrocious their pass defense was at the start of the season. It's kind of around now, but for me, that's their biggest disappointment. The fact that they let these players just like go to a track meet, basically, running up and down the field.
I want to see what their kicker has done.
Mm-hmm. He hasn't had a bad season for Baylor, but
I'm just checking.
Baylor's kicker, 23 of 23 from extra points, and then 6 of 8 from field goals.
Okay.
5%. Jesse Cantrell, still not as fun as Ronald Daniel. Yeah. For 4 years, who still has the greatest playing card of any Big 12 player. Except for maybe Dollar Bill's playing card, which is another great one.
How is their rushing this year?
As far as on the ground, Baylor's been able to make plays. They have Nasir Burden as their running back, who has 7 rushing touchdowns. Marcus Schwartz has 6. So as a combo, they're doing really well. They have 723 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. Individually, Schwartz is really carrying things. He has 7.94 yards per carry. The only quarterback who has more is Muhammad Foster at 8.58.
It kind of says something when your quarterback has almost as much yards as your running back, though.
Well, he also has 36 carries, and he has a lot of rushing yards.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Nasir Burden, though, has one of the lowest yards per carries in the conference. It's 4.12, and I think that's kind of hurting Baylor.
It is. Um, and I feel like, did you say that was one of their biggest disappointments?
I didn't mention it. I mean, just
Okay.
mentioning your pass defense, but Nasir
Okay.
kind of falls into that too.
I feel like that's more of it on the offensive end is their inability to kind of get the run game going for them.
Relying on Schwartz to be the run game instead of having
Yeah.
do it.
It acts for a great decoy, just you kind of expect more out of a Baylor running back, especially since Sean Bell was there last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's big disappointment for them. But I think a lot of people who are expecting him to be Sean Bell are kind of
Oh,
misguided.
yeah.
That's part of the problem is that he's not Sean Bell. But Sean Bell wasn't Sean Bell until like his
His
third or
junior
fourth year.
year.
Yeah, people thought he was going to come in and be great, and it took a while for him to really become the player who he was.
It was in 2018 that wasn't he a contender for the Heisman?
Mm-hmm. He's for 2018, 2019, he was a Heisman
Okay.
contender for sure.
And who did they have for recruits?
Well, let's talk about surprise first.
Oh, yeah, the surprise.
Yeah, with Bell gone, they really had to lean on Swartz more, and he took the initiative. He's completing 2/3 of his passes for 1,300 yards. He's one of the top passing quarterbacks in the conference. I think Chester Brenner has more passing yards, Foster has more passing yards, and that's it. He also has 11 touchdowns, while Brenner only has more. He has 3 interceptions,
which is one of the lowest
one of the
in the
lowest in the
conference.
conference. Yeah, he's incredible through the air. And we just talked about his rushing. Like he has 6 rushing touchdowns. He has 286 yards on the ground through 5 games. That is 57 yards a game. He is a game changer like that, which is again really impressive for him. And I'm like we talk about the quarterbacks in this conference. You mentioned Chester Brenner and Muhammad Foster, and Marcus Swartz should be right there with them. And we don't
Yeah.
mention him. He's having a very impressive season.
I feel like he's kind of overshadowed by Mohamed Foster, though, because Mohamed Foster is having one of those years to where it's just ridiculous. And
Transcendent talent right now.
yeah.
But I think as far as Baylor goes, Swartz is definitely their biggest surprise how good he's been because he's been good in the past. But even last year, looking at his stats in comparison, he wasn't there. He wasn't a guy who can change the game by himself. He had 4 touchdowns all of last season, 37 rushing yards a game on the ground, that is. Okay. He's almost a clip. As far as passing goes, he
had 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year, and then he had 3,078 yards.
Yeah, so he's about to eclipse both of those. He's having a great season.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Recruits.
So next one, recruits. Yeah, for Baylor, there's one. I'm not even going to look at the interface here. Garrett Powers is the best, not just best recruit in the country. Dude has an amazing football name. He is a stud Mike linebacker. He is recruits in the country, our best linebackers in the country. All of the above is just makes him an incredible talent, and it's very jealous that he is going to Baylor.
Yeah.
They do have some other players coming here, but I don't think any of them compare because Sean Hodge is going to be good strong safety. Samuel McGee and is a good defensive end. They have some solid guys, but none of them compare to how the 6'4", 229 monster of a man Garrett Powers. And I think you put him on any team in the country on defense right now. Like I don't think there's many teams who would take their inside linebacker situation and would not trade it for Garrett Powers, which says a lot, I think. I think he's the best inside linebacker prospect we've seen since Akil, and I think he's going to be better than that.
Ooh, that linebacker combination is going to be terrifying. His defense is going to be terrifying this next year.
Yeah, they have Caleb McNamara too, don't they?
Yeah.
As a guy who's redshirting, and they have another guy who transferred in. They have a lot of linebackers.
Yeah, they have a 5.0 outside linebacker, Zachary McGale, that's redshirted, and it's just they have two inside linebackers that are redshirted also. One's a 4.0. So they're not missing anything on depth. I was checking to see if they had a 5.0 currently at inside linebacker to offer kind of like a different opinion, but no, that's their best signing this year.
I don't think anyone would disagree with you. I think it'd be hard to argue.
Yeah, I was just seeing if they had any, if they already had, like, say, a junior 5.0 at that position, would they bench him for a year or something like that? But no, that isn't the case. He's going to be
a red shirt. Then he could be like a 5-star guy as a freshman.
Yeah,
basically north year coming out. A linebacker position. All right, but moving on, we got 4 teams left. They're the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah.
Last week they had, I'm not sure what that was in Kansas, or I think they play in Texas, but it was an interesting game. They ended up winning conference. They're still 4-1, but kind of scary. Do you think how much they gave up to Kansas State?
Oh yeah, 41 points for a team that's 3-1. I feel like Kansas has kind of had would you say an easier schedule this year?
Kansas State,
yeah, and
especially
for their quarterback to throw 2 interceptions in that last game, especially when he has a high the second highest completion percentage in the Big 12. And for him to only throw 4 interceptions all year is kind of surprising.
Yeah. No, Kyler, I think if we're talking surprises for Texas, it's Kyler Tackett. Because with the junior college guy, you don't know what you're getting for someone coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Kyler Tackett has been impressive. Through the air, he has about 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Last week was a bit of a down week for him, even though they scored a lot of points. It's not his best game. And then on the ground, Tackett has a yards and a touchdown. So not a game changer on the ground, but still making plays. I think the stability of having a sophomore, the junior college sophomore, Tackett is coming in and being able to immediately start and play well bodes really well for this team, especially when you have a sophomore like Simeon Wells, who's going to be good for Texas too, and having a decent season. 516 yards, 5 touchdowns, getting near 5 yards per carry, 4.73, so not as near as you'd hope, but
now for disappointments, how would you say that they are going at? You would have to think it would have to be something on the defensive end if they're giving up 41 points to Kansas State.
Yeah, I agree. It's on the defensive side of the ball. I think it might be those very young cornerbacks that they have in right now.
Or their inside linebacker position only is at a 2.0 of 3.5. But that could also not be it. He also has 2 linebackers. He's in a 3-4.
Yeah. And his linebackers aren't the best. His defensive line's probably the best in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas has been playing well at that position.
But yeah, I'd say it's his safeties here. at a 3.5 as a starter in a zone and 3.5 or 4.5 strong safety.
Yeah, how they've been playing because they've been giving up a lot through the air.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think has Devin Braxton made a stat sheet this year. I don't see him. Devin Braxton. Oh, he has 2 interceptions. Never mind. He's playing well. Yeah, Devin Braxton's playing better than I thought he was. So he
I'd
does
give it
have.
up to the safeties.
Yeah, the safeties aren't really making impact plays. You have Lucas Tatum, who's okay, and then Jalen Dickens. I don't think either of them. Looking down the stat sheet, I don't see either of their names right
Yeah,
here.
so I feel like they're
Jalen Dickens
primarily.
caught his first interception against Kansas State for the year, so maybe they're coming around though. But I think they're getting beat through deep, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're off base on this. But I think their biggest disappointment, just in general, has been their past defense. They've had a few interceptions, but they're getting beat in the air.
But hey, a win's a win at 4-1. You kind of just have to ignore that, and hopefully they'll come around eventually, maybe next week or something like that.
And Damani Jeffries is right here, also has 2 interceptions. So the corners are making plays. And Texas, they're not bad. They're 4-1. Like, I don't, and their offense is playing well. Their defense is clicking. It just kind of scary. Can you see Kansas State do that? And so you just kind of look for the defense, see where the problem was, but it's kind of hard to find. There's no thing we can point out. Just as the season goes forward, I think that's what you're going to want to watch for Texas.
All right, so then recruits. I was really hoping that they would, looking at their offensive line here, I was really hoping that they would have recruits lined up for their offensive line because they don't really have anything besides the left tackle, who's a 5.0. Other than that, it's just a bunch of 3.5s holding down the fort, and they don't have any offensive linemen redshirted, and it doesn't look like they're doing anything to, at this moment, to.
They tried to get Charlie Becker, but Texas Tech kind of stole him away. They have Bobby Drake at their left tackle position. The rest of them are just young, bad, but not particularly good either. They're going to bring in, I think, David Keating as a offensive guard. He's not committed yet, but he should be soon. I think they have a couple tackles. They're trying to look at a center too. So that's what they've been focusing on. But none of those guys are committed yet. But they do have a great name, Daquan Crockett, wide receiver out of Flower Buff High School in Corpus Christi, Texas. He's a big dude, 6'4", 214.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right when you said 6'4", I immediately thought Target, but yeah, that's one of their only two. I can't see Aola is his name. Aola, I can't see him, their offensive tackle that they recruited. I can't see him being a starter this next season. I feel like he's going to be a red shirt and just kind of because they have a freshman and a starter.
Yeah, left tackle. He'd be a right tackle later on.
He'd definitely be a right tackle, but I'd say redshirt him the first year and then have him play his senior year.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's going to be as good probably as redshirt freshman year and then on. So whenever they need him, he's still a good guy. But I think Crockett could be.
Oh yeah, he's going to be a threat for them.
They don't have good receivers.
They have a redshirt senior who's a 4.5 and a true freshman who's a 1.0, 4.5 as their third receiver.
Yeah, Sean Lyles.
Yeah.
And, I'm wondering why they played him instead of redshirting him, but it was probably the right decision. So Daquan Crockett might be another guy who probably shouldn't, but might come in as a true freshman and start. But probably not. We'll see how they decide to play that because they still don't have a lot of receiver depth.
Because I was gonna say maybe they have him as a kick returner or punt returner, but they don't. So
I think The biggest disappointment for this Texas team is that their fifth string running back hasn't seen the field yet.
Oh yeah,
I can't pronounce it. Hoina Ho Ho Kyle Hose Isaacs. Yeah, we need to see him out there just for one game report, please, as well.
just to get on the stat sheet.
Just to get on a stat sheet.
I want that name to go down in CFBHC history, honestly.
Absolutely. So I think having targets to grow with Kyler Tackett's going to be the biggest thing, or even later on Lucas Beckwith. So we'll see. All right. Next, we have the TCU Horned Frogs. Well, later in the show, we're mentioning them now. I'm kind of excited.
I learned that's a Native American name. High back to wool.
What does it mean?
High back to wool.
Sounds like a good thing for running back to have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, most definitely.
All right.
Well, I was curious to know what it meant. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, my Horned Frogs are next. We're on a 3-game winning streak, which is nice after starting 0-2. Biggest surprise, I want to say probably just how able to play. I think the biggest surprise as far as an individual player has been my inside linebacker, Elliot McLemore, though. He's come in, he had about 32 tackles on the season last year and over the entire season, so never really made a huge impact. But so far this year, he has 26 tackles and 2 interceptions from the inside linebacker position. He was nabbed as a preseason all-conference player, and he's kind of living into that. And I think he's playing well. And he's a guy who is only a sophomore now and has a lot to grow into. But I think he's been my biggest surprise because offensively it's been about what I expected, some up and down games with a lot of freshmen starting. Mm-hmm. So there's not surprised or disappointed about. But this is probably still where my disappointment is going to be the bad games for Milner. Because, I mean, he's looked rough. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the Big 12. 7 touchdowns to 5 interceptions is okay at this point in his career, but he also is only completing 60% of his passes at 6.75 yards per attempt, which is the lowest in the conference. Actually, no, August Blank has worse. And Peter,
I don't think it's worse than my quarterback situation.
Okay, it's not, but he's had good games. He had a good game against Kansas State, but he's been struggling. I think that's a disappointment. I think there's a lot of excitement, a lot of good things coming from him, but I also think that that's where his biggest problem lies. I think that's where the biggest disappointment of this team is. Either that or how he got torched through the air our first 3 games. You have anything to say? Or are you pulling something?
I was just going to say it's kind of weird for you to be torched through the air considering that your backfield is amazing. But I was just going to say you have a very young team here besides your offensive line, which is comprised of seniors.
Yeah.
But it's just a very young team, and I'm very excited to see where this is going to take you.
Hopefully, Big 12 championship.
Yeah. Also, Felix Luck. What about him?
He is, not
playing like more of a backup option at this point.
Yeah, right now. So he is the backup quarterback. The reason being, I think, as a guy with more potential, and if I was going to start a quarterback this year, it's one that I would make the decision, start them for 4 years unless they just can't do it. And right now, Milner's showing enough that he's definitely earned to keep the starting job. I think he's done a lot. And Felix Luck is not a bad quarterback, and I think in a couple years he's going to make some CUSA team in Texas really happy. But that's kind of it. He's the backup option right now. It's unfortunate that it kind of worked out that way for him. We'll still see. Like Milner could keep struggling, and we decide to try out Felix. But the offense I was building towards, I really wanted to be able to spread people out and have weapons at every position. So have a star running back, 3 or 4 deep at wide receiver, a good tight end, and then the offensive line. And a scrambling quarterback just adds one more thing they have to worry about. So I wanted to build a group together, which is why I ended up playing Milner over Felix. Yeah, it's tough to see him, and you never know if it gets bad and we think we need to make a change. We can always try it out, but the further we get in the season, we'll probably take a scheme change too. So,
I mean, I can always understand starting a scrambling quarterback. I had one for 4 years. They're quite useful, and I don't think people give them enough of a chance.
Yeah.
So
I'll scramble. And I got bored of 4 years of Nathan Burton doing the same thing pretty much every week.
who would you say is your biggest recruit this year? I know there's a big talent pool in Texas, and it looks like you're making a great use of it.
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm not, as an immediate player, James Kaplan is my biggest recruit, and he's also like, he's a 4-star center, but he's going to come in and be an immediate starter. Everyone else is probably going to redshirt. I think the best guy, the guy I'm most excited about, is Quan Shaw. Dude,
Yeah, I was about to ask you, are you going to redshirt the 2.5 of 5.0?
Yeah, because if you have my depth chart pulled up, if you look up my defensive tackles, he wouldn't get a chance to start as a freshman, so there would be no point in playing him.
Yeah, it looks like you have juniors there. So
I have a junior and a sophomore there, so I'll probably redshirt him, let Adriel Sierra graduate, and then have him play along Josiah Pickens, then Hooker Jackson the next year. So I have another defensive tackle up there, which is it's gonna be a good defensive line. I'm so excited because you remember Texas Tech in like 2015, I want to say, when they had Jeremy Miller and someone Jackson. I can't remember the name, but the 2 5-star defensive tackles who just ate teams alive. Like that was the core of their defense, and they didn't get beat until they faced the national champion Oklahoma Sooners. So that's what I'm envisioning with those 2 guys kind of locking down the fort there. And that's why I'm really most excited about Quan Shaw. But as far as most important right now, it's going to be Kaplan.
Understandable. Moving on to the next one, which is I closed down the power. Oh wait, no, there it is. Oklahoma State.
And I think for the Cowboys here, the biggest surprise has to be how incredible Chester Brenner is. Holy crap. I didn't see this coming for this guy. He 128 attempts, 128 completions of 189 attempts, 1,503 yards, 17 touchdowns. He leads the conference by 6 touchdowns. Does have 7 interceptions, but 67% of his passes.
They are very much an air raid offense team.
You think that, but if you look at on the ground, the running back has 8 touchdowns. Khalil Bell's second in the conference for rushing touchdowns. Has 82 carries, so he's not carrying the ball. He only has 65 rushing yards a game, but he scored 8. They have the best offense in the conference right now. If you West Virginia,
I'm just surprised at how well they're going back to the biggest surprise thing. I'm just surprised at how well Brenner is able to torch defenses, such as like when he faced me this last week. He absolutely lit my defense up. Even though he threw for 2 interceptions, he still passed for 280 yards. And he just torched my defense.
Yeah, and they're doing this. He's gotten better without Raheem,
Yeah,
which is insane. The best wide receiver, probably the second best wide receiver the Big 12 has ever seen, behind only Ty Miller, and they've gotten better without him.
I hate his depth chart currently. How I have to highlight it.
Oh yeah, I don't know what happened with the formatting there.
I
I think
think he did it while it was like the dark scheme.
yeah, and then it changed up on him.
Yeah. But checking on it, he still has a very young receiving core, or not young, but juniors and freshmen.
Yeah.
But he has no starting seniors. So basically, this next year is going to be almost a do or die for him. Oh, yeah,
No, they have so much though. They had the like top 5 recruiting class in the country last year. Oklahoma State's still really a year or two away from how good their team's going to get. I think as far as their offense, it's going to take some rebuilding around, but
ooh, 5
they
point.
need another quarterback too because Chester Brenner is going to be gone after this year.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone's going to take a chance on him in the draft.
Um,
Agent.
I feel like 4.0 quarterbacks are not really wanted in NFL HC, and it's kind of sad. But
Once in a while, like Orly's still around with the 49ers. Justin Hunter's, I think, a third string on the uh, Carolina Panthers. But yeah, so I think it would be a tough shot for someone to take. But I think he'll find his way as a backup somewhere.
oh yeah, most certainly. But I feel like he will go to free agency, and he
Yeah,
probably won't get drafted. He'll be an undrafted free agent, and that's kind of sad with um, the season that he's putting up. Who always I don't think I'm looking at his last year numbers, and they are ridiculous. He threw 597 passes and for 4,132 yards.
yeah. Sorry, my laptop's having troubles. If you can hear me.
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. It just was lingering for a long while there.
Yeah, so it's taking a while for stuff to load.
All right, recruits. How is he doing on recruiting?
State's been so far. Yeah. So what would you say? Sorry, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, I was just saying, how is he doing on recruiting? And it looks like he
Oh
is.
wait, what about biggest disappointment, real quick?
Oh yeah, biggest disappointment.
Yeah, sorry. That's why I don't know if you heard me. I said, what do you think the biggest disappointment for has been?
Oh, I didn't hear that, but
I don't know. Maybe it's their run defense because they uh they almost lost to Texas Tech. That was a close game, and probably shouldn't have been, just because they're one of the better teams in the conference. Might be like guys like Trevor Orlando because they're outside linebacker who's their star player. He has 17 tackles and 1 interception on the season, but feels like a guy like that should be getting more tackles. Maybe I'm just nitpicking here but
although they're I mean, you kind of have to nitpick with this team, but
yeah,
their two defensive ends are both blitz things, so I'm not sure if that would be better in a run defense or not.
mm-hmm.
But you're not really getting support up that middle.
Yeah, and I think just in general that defensive line has made them struggle on the run game. I think Solomon McLaughlin took advantage of that and almost beat him.
Yeah.
And like he didn't have an incredible game as far as yards per carry, but he got a lot of yards against him and a lot of points. But it's hard to say with this Oklahoma State team because they are very good. That's what it
Yeah.
comes down to.
I feel like what?
Did I actually bring in the Empire stuff?
Yeah.
Neither did so.
Well, it looks like he needs those dishes done real quick. So yeah, Oklahoma State, their offense has been definitely the story to tell for them. I think it's what's making them conference champion contenders, but their or the fact that they're all an offensive team and they do have some struggles on defense. But so again, it's hard to pinpoint just where they are. Now, as far as recruits go, I think they're bringing in the next Trevor Orlando with Brian Suarez. He's about as good as Trevor Orlando was coming in, and he's a outside linebacker from Midland, Texas, who's another guy comes in as immediate starter. There are a lot of those guys coming into the Big 12, which is exciting. A lot of young talent coming in.
Yeah, I feel like he was more intended on building depth for his program this year round because he still has such a very young team.
And
so I felt like he kind of just was kind of protecting and building his program this year.
I just noticed Oklahoma State has a cornerback recruit named David Medley. Not David, David. Yeah. Oh man, that's a funny name. But yeah, I think Suarez is gonna be another piece. I think Oklahoma State's building for maybe 2 years from now when Suarez is gonna be great. Their entire recruiting class from last year is gonna be redshirt sophomores or so at the time, and I think that's when they're gonna compete for a conference championship. That's gonna be their big year. So 2-3 years down the road, and that's why I think he's the most important recruit. Plus, they don't have a ton of other really important guys except for maybe Daniel Brunson. But I don't think any are as good as Suarez.
Yeah. There is one complaint I do have about Oklahoma State, though. And that is their last game versus my team. They only had a 25% third down conversion. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is a team that really punishes off turnovers, meaning that if, say, ISU threw an interception to Oklahoma State, they can really do damage to a team off positive turnovers. But I feel like when they have the ball, it's kind of hard for them to get it going on third down, and just kind of like how I was able to get 5 for 17 on third downs off of them.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, so that I'm not sure if that was just because, but in a new offensive scheme, I should not be doing that well against them. Yeah.
So there are still some concerns, but Oklahoma State's going to be a fun team to watch. They also played some not great teams at the start of the season, but they've beaten Texas Tech, and they're 5-0. So I'm very excited to see what happens. I think they're going to have to compete with the other teams in the conference at the top, but it's a damn good team Panthers building.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, we had to nitpick with them this time.
Very nitpicky.
Because they are such a team that it's hard to find where it is with them.
All right.
What's wrong? Yep, moving on to the number 1 team.
The West Virginia Mountaineers. You ready?
Yep.
Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads. All right, the Mountaineers.
Shocks at their number 1, but it's kind of well deserved after this week's win.
Yeah, they're up there. Which I think is fair. I think they're the best team in the conference. And I think their losses are Pitt and Penn State, who are both top 10 teams. I think Penn should be a top 10 team. So,
Penn State and Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, yeah.
Okay.
Now, this is a really hard question to answer for West Virginia. Their biggest surprise and biggest disappointment, because
the whole what were they last year? Were they dead last?
Dead last?
No, they weren't dead last. Who?
They were up there. But the thing is, with this team, it's exactly what we expected with them, because you have where you have Foster, who's running all over the field. You have J.C. Weldon making big plays. You have Hudson Adams being a force on that defensive line. And it's really hard to talk about like who their biggest surprise is when their best players are the best players in the conference that we knew going in.
I am going to say this with their offensive line. I'd say that's the greatest surprise, considering how low starred what their potential is and how well their offense has been able to perform this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's kind of like a big surprise, especially considering that they have offensive guard as their backup center and a bunch of other things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the fact that I think that's a good choice. Their offensive line has performed well, has put up solid ratings, and has done enough to put them in positions to win. Which has done enough to put their playmakers in position to make plays. Like give Muhammad Foster time, and if he doesn't have time, it doesn't matter because he's running past you. Give J.C. Weldon time to be 30 yards downfield and open up holes for guys like Mufasa.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are definitely the biggest surprises, and I think that's made that offense really good. Now, and it's really hard to talk about how good this offense is as a surprise, though. But wow, Muhammad Foster. 309 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, 8.5 yards per carry. He's like every time he carries the ball, he's getting pretty much a first down. And then through the air, he's just as good. He has 152 for 1585, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception, 73% of his passes. If you didn't know any better, those are a drop back pocket quarterback stats, not a scrambler. But I think their biggest disappointment, though, is on the offensive side as well, because being alongside a quarterback like that who can make plays on his legs, that should make you a better running back. But I don't think Mustafa is really there. I think Muhammad Mustafa, especially his junior year, should be getting more than 4.5 yards a carry, or at least be making more of an impact than his 92 yards a game, which, again, is very nitpicky. But it's just me saying that I think he can be better than that, especially as a piece. It's more speaking to how good the rest of the offense is around him and how he's kind of lagging behind.
I mean, he's also at 102 carries, so he's up there with kind of a majority of people who have carries in the Big 12, meaning he has one of the most. Yeah. But the fact that he only has 463 yards and 4 touchdowns off of it kind of is lackluster of what you expect out of a 3.0 or 4.0.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nitpicky, but in this offense, you kind of expect very good results out of it.
Yeah, that's the hard. It's when you're comparing other running backs and how they're doing, and they're doing worse than he is, and we don't call him out for that because they don't have the same pieces around them and the same kind of like build to succeed in the situation they're in. So that's kind of why I think he's struggling. And it's also because there's really no one else to pick out. I think the other big disappointment is that they couldn't upset Penn State or Pitt, which would have been huge for West Virginia, huge for the conference too. If they beaten, say, either of those two teams, they're looking at a top 10 or top 15 ranking right now.
Mm-hmm. which is kind of weird because looking at their defensive side, it's just you don't have any players that are besides their
Hudson Adams.
tackle. Yeah, Hudson Adams.
Love Hudson.
But you don't have anyone that seems to be like a playmaker. It's just kind of like a whole collaboration of effort between this team. And I find that kind of weird.
Yeah.
And like if you had this team anywhere else, I feel like they would not perform the same way. But there's something about this scheme that he's running to where the team
coaching really well.
Yeah, he's able to work with the low caliber players that he has and able to make it well, or in the fact that like it's kind of just like he's scoring so much that people just can't keep up. Almost 14 points per quarter in the Oklahoma game.
Yeah, that's like Oklahoma scored well too starting out, and they just once you fall behind, it's demoralizing.
Yeah, it's just you can't keep up, and the fact that he doesn't throw interceptions, you can't.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things helping this defense. This offense does not turn the ball over. I don't think they haven't turned it over yet.
No, they have 0 fumbles and 0.
Wow, they have not turned the ball over a single time this season.
Actually, he's thrown 1 interception.
He's thrown 1, so yeah, you're right. He's thrown,
but still, like he hasn't. They haven't turned the ball over.
Texas Tech hasn't turned the ball over at all. Wow.
Yeah, but he's only thrown 79 times.
But they haven't fumbled either, so wow.
But the fact is that this team is able to keep their defense off of the field, I think is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And how they're just able to torch because they don't. Do they get interceptions a lot? It doesn't look like it.
No, they're not outstanding. About par with the rest of the conference. Muhammadu Moore. Why do they have so many Muhammads? Muhammadu Moore has 2 picks for which positive plus minus. Lamont Carson has 3 interceptions. So that's at least 5. So yeah, they do make plays in the secondary, and winning the plus minus turnover battle like that makes a big difference.
Yeah, especially when kind of lackluster defense as they do. It's very important to keep that defense off of the field and then just keep scoring, and just hope that your defense doesn't break down. That's why I think their whole mentality is at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, in question, who's their best recruit?
Let me check.
I think it has to be between George Story, who is the new quarterback coming in, who might have to start as a freshman, or Corey Easley, the new wide receiver coming in, who might have to start as a freshman, or Bryce Madison, the running back coming in, who probably won't have to start as a freshman.
I'm going to give it up to their wide receiver. Corey Easley, because they don't really have much depth in the wide receiver department. They have, they have all juniors and seniors. So if he were to redshirt, he's graduating 3 and then keeping only 3 receivers this year.
Yeah. Well, if J.C. Weldon declares, it might only be 2.
And he has 1 redshirt senior, it looks like.
Yeah.
But he's only going to have 4 receivers this next year if he decides to redshirt. But that means he'll only have 2 receivers if he decides to redshirt. So I imagine they'll be starting immediately.
Mm-hmm. And I think Corey Easley is a guy who he grew up a big West Virginia fan. And think about the last 4 years, he's been in high school and he's been watching football, and this town's been going.
High school called University?
University's in Morgantown. So it's probably like right on campus of West Virginia. Like he's a hometown boy, and he's going to go to West Virginia. And I think the people there couldn't be more excited when he made that decision. But I don't think it was hard for him.
No.
You follow in the footsteps of J.C. Weldon, and he might not get to play alongside him. Hopefully he will, but he's got his quarterback there with him, George Story, his running back, Bryce Madison. And all right, I think we're about to run out of time. It's been here a while, maybe about an hour and a half. So what's up?
But all in all, it's just a good team.
Yeah, and all in all, it's a very good team. So, all right, everyone. Thank you for watching. It's another week of the Big 12 podcast. Can't wait to see what happens this week. Go Frogs.
And go Cyclones.
All right, see ya.